welcome to the 2013 Charles Taylor Prize for Literary Nonfiction. This year's jury is again strong, and I'd like to introduce them. Susanne Boyce comes from that too often unappreciated branch of writing that is the television, film, and radio media. In her position at CTV, where she was president of creative content and specialties, Susanne had the unique ability to find the penetrating and perceptive human stories that led an unwieldy mass of information into digestible and compelling wholes. As for Richard Gwyn, what can you say about Richard? He personified the field of literary nonfiction. His last two books on Sir were nothing short of astonishing. It goes without saying that they heartily deserve the Taylor Prize, the Shaughnessy Cohen Prize, the Defoe Prize, and I know you know they were shortlisted for a whole bunch of others. Joe Curtis. Joe pioneered the teaching of Canadian writing, not Canadian writing, creative writing at Humber. And under his influence and guidance, a generation of writers have learned to become professionals working under the mentorship of senior acclaimed writers. I think it's fair to say that there's not a person in this country who hasn't been affected by Joe and his work.
The thing I want to do, or use this moment for, is to make a comment about the books. There were, as you know, 129 of them. General comment about the books, there were 129 of them. And I detected, I thought, a common characteristic in a number of them. And that was, this was a book written by a Canadian, published by a Canadian company, that had very little to say about Canada. It was writing about the world. It was some part of the world where events had happened, drama of some kind or other, where there was a charismatic individual or troubles of one kind or another, it doesn't matter. And what struck me was, there were about a fifth of all of them, depending on definition, went into this category. And there might be marginal references to Canada, but the issue was some part of the world, or the big world out there. And it struck me, here you have Canadian writers at ease with the world outside, and confident of their ability to portray that part of the world that they want to capture back to Canadians. So that means that there are enough Canadians who are prepared to accept the ability and competence and flair of Canadian writers to write accurately and with passion and so on about the rest of the world. And this is, I think, an enormous step forward. And Noreen used the phrase bearing fruits. This, I think, is one of the fruits that has come from ventures like the Taylor Prize, encouraging people to reach out. And it is important, I think. It's a sign of growth. It's a sign of maturation. We are close to, or inevitably will soon be, the most internationalized nation in the world. And this is another aspect of that. Obviously, the big, long, final step is for Canadians to write books about the outside world that people in the rest of the world will accept and respond to. Of course, that's happened. I mean, you think of Margaret Macmillan, you think of Naomi Klein. We've done it, but I'm talking about a larger number. So this I took to be a very encouraging development, and I was delighted to have been on the jury at the time when we had to face the challenge of picking out from the 15 down to 5, eventually, of course, to 1.
I'm going to let this out that we're conscious of the fact that Carol Bishop Gwyn is married to Richard Gwyn. In discussing Carol Bishop Gwyn's fine biography of Celia Franca, The Pursuit of Perfection, Richard recused himself entirely. It was we other two jurors, Susanne Boyce and I, who enthusiastically placed the biography on the short list. And so, of the book, the jury wrote, "With great art and skill, Carol Bishop Gwyn does for Celia Franca what history requires and demands. She gives us the complex story of an artist both driven and tyrannical, both sensitive and unreasonable, but someone able, with little help and in what was little more than a cultural backwater, to found a ballet company which was to become one of the best in the world, the National Ballet of Canada. The company still bears her stamp. Bishop Gwyn's rich biography tells us exactly why."
Tim Cook for Warlords, Borden, Mackenzie King, and Canada's World Wars, published by Alan Lane, an imprint of Penguin Canada. Of the book, the jury wrote, "We measure Robert Borden and William Lyon Mackenzie King, our two World War prime ministers, by the extent to which each rose to the occasion, led our country to bloody war, and let us out again, each of them effective warriors striving for peace. Tim Cook's Warlords, Borden, Mackenzie King, and Canada's World Wars, portrays these two men as they really were, men moderately able to lead Canada through a dark time, and despite their numerous shortcomings, particularly Mackenzie King's, able to survive politically. Cook's great achievement is his capturing of Canada as it grapples with its identity."
Sandra Joie for Journey with No Maps, A Life of P.K. Page, published by McGill Queen's University Press. Of the book, the jury wrote, "In taking on the life of P.K. Page, Sandra Joie needed to be as driven and sensitive as her subject. Journey with No Maps, A Life of P.K. Page is not only the story of one of Canada's great artists and poets, but also a history of the flowering of Canadian literature and culture in the 20th century. Using the tools of the scholar, letters, notes, diaries, manuscripts, texts, and interviews, Joie fashions a compelling and necessary biography. She does the important job of leaving us with the big, rich life story, which gives us an extra dimension to the art of a great writer."
Ross King for Leonardo and the Last Supper, published by Bond Street Books, an imprint of Doubleday Canada. Of the book, the jury wrote, "Told with flair, Leonardo and the Last Supper is the latest book in Ross King's studies of medieval Italian masters, from Machiavelli to Brunelleschi to now the grand master of all, Leonardo da Vinci. The Last Supper is the most famous painting in the world, excepting only for another by the same painter, the Mona Lisa. And it is the painting that raised Da Vinci from the status of a highly promising but exasperatingly unproductive painter to the rank of the greatest artistic genius of all time. Leonardo and the Last Supper is a masterly exercise in the art of popular biography."
Andrew Preston for Sword of the Spirit, Shield of Faith, Religion in American War and Diplomacy, published by Knopf Canada. Of the book, the jury wrote, "Fluently written, comprehensively researched, and scrupulously balanced, Andrew Preston's Sword of the Spirit, Shield of Faith describes how the foreign policy of the United States has been and is influenced alternately, decisively, and marginally by the fact that so many Americans regard themselves as people chosen to do God's work to others. And because American leaders all the way from Lincoln to George W. Bush have used religious convictions to justify political acts, showing that the centrality of religion in American life is by no means unique to fundamentalists and neoconservatives, this important work has such chapter titles as High Priests of the Cold War and A Judeo-Christian Foreign Policy, which convey Preston's originality and indeed his bravery."